I was so taken out of the film by the opener and how stock it was that I recall thinking, oh no, this is not gonna be good. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us one of our favorite co-hosts, Avalon, to review the most recent release, Venom: The Last Dance. Screenplay was by Tom Hardy and Kelly Marcel, who also wrote the story for this film, and it was directed by Kelly Marcel. Now, getting right into the basic impressions we got after leaving the theater, Avalon, what did you think of Venom: The Last Dance?
I mean, as a comedy, I loved some of the comedic moments. It's the story itself was a very mixed bag. I don't. There are things they definitely didn't do well, and there are things I have gripes with. But there are things that also was like, okay, they made some decisions I was actually happy with overall. But yeah, it just. I mean, we'll get into it, but that's my general impression.
I mean, you like comedies probably a little better than me, so I think I generally go slightly harder on ones
Yes.
that have a stronger comedic element. But yeah, I think that there is some things going for this.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, two things I took away just right off the bat was one, pacing is key, right? And that's, I think, one of the bigger flaws with this film is that the pacing could have been a lot better. And we'll get into exactly why that's a problem in this review.
Mm-hmm.
But secondarily,
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not, the title is important. And this was one of those films, one of the few films, I would say, where I thought, okay, that title should not have been the title. Why is that the case? Also something we'll get into today, so stay tuned if you want to hear more. But if you're someone who's here who hasn't really watched the film but still wants to hear the analysis, Avalon, can you give them a basic rundown, a summary of what Venom: The Last Dance is about?
So Venom: The Last Dance starts with introduction of Null, the god king of the symbiotes, who's trapped in a other world dimension, and we get the impression he's looking for something called the Codex, which we don't know what it is. But then we cut to Venom and Eddie after the events of Let There Be Carnage, and he's essentially a fugitive now, where they think he killed, like, caused damage and killed people in San Francisco when he didn't. Well, not the people they think he killed anyway, but he they decide they're going to go to New York to try to take care of this problem when Null's henchmen, I guess, start to hunt him, and they start looking for him because apparently Venom and Eddie Brock have the Codex. And so now they're on the run from both Null and the, I guess, U.S. government, because the U.S. government's also looking for them as well to try to capture Venom. So, and the whole movie kind of is like their run around the Nevada and Arizona desert.
Yeah, the Codex is like a critical part of this film, which is the key, I guess, to Null being unleashed from the prison that he was put in previously. So that's why he's being chased by these alternate beings. But definitely, yeah, that pretty much summarizes all of it. Based on the 9-point rating system that we always use to review these films, this is what we get to start off our discussion. What did the 9 points give you for this film, Avalon?
3.65.
That's amazing. I'm not gonna lie, I thought we were going to be totally different. But a 3.65 is pretty darn close to what I got, which was a 3.45. So yeah, we are actually pretty in cahoots on that one. I am genuinely surprised.
So, well, let me put it this way. I'll think I probably enjoyed this movie more than my review lets on, just because of the humor and dark, like, think some of the moments the movie did genuinely make me laugh, and I enjoyed those moments. But because it is a comedy, and I do love that. But from a story perspective, it is lacking in some areas. And when I focus on those points, yeah, that's where the problems.
And I will say, in my review, there were a couple times where I went, if there was something that could be improved here that I didn't see in my rating, I'm willing to give it some points, right?
Mm.
So it's not that I fully thought everything was terrible. It's just that I genuinely didn't see any merit in certain areas, but there could be. I just didn't catch it. So we'll get into that. But let's start it right off with that opening scene. We get him in Mexico. He's drinking whatever Venom decides to make him. And then, he decides he has to get on the run again and get to New York City to show him the Statue of Liberty and to, I guess, blackmail a friend to get him off the records. It was
blackmail a judge.
Okay. Yeah, it seemed very unclear who he knew or anything like that. Not that it actually impacts this film. But
I think it was a callback to the very first movie, because in the very first movie, when it starts out, I believe there is a brief reference to him being like kicked out of New York City because of a judge. And so I think there's an idea that he's going to blackmail that judge because he gathered dirt or crap on that judge. I believe is the idea. So, because there are a few callbacks to prior movies in this movie.
Correct.
But, so I think that was just a callback, and it more or less gives a motive for Venom and Eddie to start heading back from Mexico to the U.S.
Right.
And so, before they get attacked on the plane over the Nevada desert.
Right. Yeah, and that's pretty much, it's like the impetus for him going there, which is all it really needed. What did you think of Null before we get too far into it? Because he is the opening bit, right? Where you see, I'm in prison. Let's send those bad guys out to take the codex back so I can be free.
I gave it 0 points for the opener, and that's because this is one of the most stock openings to a superhero movie that I've seen in a while. Like, it is, like, clearly we're supposed to be showing the villain and all this stuff, like, given, like, the plot devices and everything. And it's just, like, it isn't interesting or memorable. Like, we've seen this before in other hero movies, other stories. It was like, this is not new. We've seen this before. And the worst part is, I almost felt like the writers and filmmakers knew that this was stuff. Like, this was, like, the general things. And so, like, instead of trying to fix it, it was almost like they were trying to get through it as fast as possible. Like, try to get all the information out there and move on to the next scene. Which was like, I was not happy when I was watching the opening sequence. I was like, this is not good storytelling, and that does irritate me a little bit, that they just passed over this, and they could have changed this to made this better. So, yeah.
Right. Well, even I'm not a huge Marvel buff, right? But even in brief discussions with other people, realizing that some people perceive Null to be this ultimate evil villain in some regards, right? He's super powerful, whatever. You get the impression that he's supposed to be the big bad guy, but he just felt so stock that it was a little disappointing for sure. And this is where this was one of those times where I was sitting in the theater, and I try hard to just, get engaged in the movie, get really wrapped in, and that's why I don't take notes in the middle of the film, so I always try to take them after and stuff like that. And that's just a personal preference, right? If you guys do it who are listening, that's perfectly fine. Do whatever you want, it's your experience. But in this case, I was so taken out of the film by the opener and how stock it was that I recalled thinking, oh no, this is not gonna be good. And it's just like even some of those lines that they show you at the beginning of the film were actually, I think, more actively destructive to the effectiveness of the film than if they had just been left out. And the first example that comes to mind is when he's talking to the Xenophages, right? His little minions that are crawling around him as he's in prison, and he says, go and get the codex to free me, and I will reward you with your lives. And I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, if these aliens have any sentience at all, they're going to think, or I can just have my life by not freeing you. I don't see how that's a reward. And there's almost a sense in which it indicated some level of sentience with the Xenophages, even though they act like basic subservient brutes who are just following their master the rest of the movie. I almost think that line would be better if it didn't exist, because then they are just the basic brutes that are going out to kill everyone. They're the beast, and it becomes the beast villains that you're facing, not are they sentient, are they not. That's like a small thing, right? It's not a killer for the film, but there was things like that they were trying to explain things very quickly right off the bat. And so they have you introduce this villain and says, I'm in prison, I am going to need to be saved, so why don't you go kill Venom and his friends and blah blah blah. And it was like 30 seconds in, you're getting this monologue from a villain. You go, holy crap, wait, let's slow down for a second. What's going on? And you get pretty much that pacing through the rest of the film, where they are just going, and they don't have time to explain things through a natural discourse. So instead, we're going to monologue it all to you right now so that you can understand what's about to happen. I was expecting some pushback, so I'm genuinely, I guess, excited that we're on the same page on that one.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not super familiar with the Venom comics necessarily, but I am familiar enough to know who Null is. And I was like kind of expecting more out of this than what we got out for Null as a character. Now, with that being said, there is one thing this movie does, and this is kind of jumping ahead, but I mean, with the whole like pursuit of the Xenophages, like everyone's like trying to keep Null from showing up, which means we're not giving a whole lot of screen time of Null at all in this movie. Like very little.
Sure.
And like towards the end of the movie, I was almost afraid that the writers are going to do that whole like situation of, oh, he gets the codex and then he shows up, and then we have this like stupidly short fight where Null is easily defeated by the heroes or whatnot, and like just absolutely like making him look weak and stupid. And it was just like I was almost afraid that was going to happen. Fortunately, that doesn't happen, and instead, the codex, like through certain events, the codex gets destroyed, which we'll get into in a bit. And Null doesn't get freed by the end of the movie. Now, from one perspective, I'm happy they did that, because I was like, okay, we don't actually see Null yet, so we're not actually shown like, oh, how like weak or powerful he is. So you kind of keep that mystery of his character, is he a bad villain? Is he powerful? Whatnot. So I was like, okay, I'm okay with that. That was one thing this movie did that I was actually okay with on a certain level. But I say a certain level because this is supposed to be the final movie for Venom. And if this is the final movie for Venom, where are we going to see Null next? Which is like,
Right.
It just like, and I get the impression this movie was like trying to make this an ending for Venom while also setting something else up. But I just don't know what they're trying to set up.
Yeah, and that is an interesting question, maybe just beyond this film, looking at where this is trying to go, because you get the sense in which Sony's trying to do the MCU broader universe thing with this, but yeah, the question is, where do you even go from here? Because do you really want to take these side Venom brothers and sisters and make full movies out of them, because they get even less comic time, I'm sure, than Venom does, and Venom's not the biggest comic book character. You know, he was originally a enemy of Spider-Man, so you're not getting this whole like Spider-Man's big, and then you have Venom, and then you have these like Venom's chum buddies. Like it's getting smaller and smaller, the pool you're drawing from. So I don't know. Take that as you will. I think that the future impact, Null could be an interesting way to go, but where they go with him is very questionable. So, but yeah, I don't know. I guess that's lasting impact a little early for you guys. Yeah, let's just talk about, because we already know who Eddie Brock and them are. We'll get to them in a minute, but since we're already on Null, any other thoughts on the villains, on the Xenophages, and what we see of Null in this film?
I will say another thing about the villains I think was done right was the Xenophages, for the most part, like as at the beginning it was like kind of a sad like letdown of the beginning opener. As the movie progresses and we have these like fights with the Xenophages, we get the impression that they're unstoppable, that they're kind of invincible. like the more people fight them, the more they just keep regenerating and coming back. And there's almost an aspect of that which I kind of appreciated, where it's like these are kind of like an unstoppable villain. Like this is like actually adding tension to the plot in some ways, where it's like, okay, we're actually not sure if they're going to survive. When Venom and Eddie Brock have that conversation in the broken car in the helicopter, the one scene, they're like, I don't think we're going to get out of this. Like there's legitimately like you believe that, because it's like, well, actually with what we've seen of these guys, that's a legitimate statement.
Yeah.
So I was like, I actually was like, for that part of it, the villains, the Xenophages, I appreciated that part of it.
Yeah.
Now, how they end up getting killed at the end of the story is a whole nother thing. But
Right.
other than that, I mean, and we don't see much of Null. Like even though he's was lauded as the villain of this movie, he's really got so little screen time. This is more about the Xenophages than Null.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're trying to go for the Thanos level introduction, definitely smart strategy for the revelation of him, right? Because you got Thanos slowly revealed in hints and pieces at the ends of cutscenes or in a short video in Guardians of the Galaxy, right? So you get very little glimpses before he fully manifests in the first of no wait, is it the first Avengers? No wait, it's like the third Avengers. I don't know. In one of the Avengers films, you get him.
Well, it's like, yeah, he shows up in the end credit scenes of the first two Avengers movies, and then he shows up for a few scenes in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
And then we are fully introduced, and then he's hinted at in the background of other movies until Avengers Infinity War.
Yeah. And they do, without getting too brief into a review of those films, I would say overall that build-up was fairly good because you had a lot of uncertainty over who he was. So if you're going to do that, sure. The dialogue around him is terrible, so it's a little disappointing in that regards. But sure, you get the idea that he's an ominous bad guy. And if he were to show up in a later film, he could be very deadly, right? We don't know. But Null aside, because that's basically all we have on Null, is what we've already said. Is the Xenophages, which they were basic brutes, but the unstoppability of them was a cool feature. That's where they got all the points from me, frankly, is that they were these creatures that could get blown up and then reconstitute themselves after being blown up. And that makes them appear very much an unstoppable force. And that was a great, compelling obstacle in the way of the hero trying to get to freedom. So, other than that, their tracking ability of Venom was also really interesting and added more of a unique element to the film as well. So I'm going to leave those as it lies, but that was pretty good. So let's talk about Venom and Eddie Brock. What were your impressions of him in this film, his development, why he's even in this plot? Like, let's just lay it all out there. Love to get your impressions of him.
Well, I mean, I'll say that Venom and Eddie have always been flawed characters in every single movie they're in. So, I mean, in that regard, they're not perfect characters. They're not like, so, I mean, in some ways, like, they do have a little bit of depth, but this is the third movie we've seen them in. And I get the impression, I mean, I haven't seen the first two movies in a bit, but I get the impression that they really haven't changed much over the course of these three movies. So it's almost like we're just getting the same characters again. And it's almost like, well, they haven't really learned or changed much over the course of two movies. I mean, and I guess, so I mean, in some ways it's like, well, in some ways, like, they get some points, but in some ways they just don't, because they're not really changing. They're just static characters. So, now, I will say the motive is compelling in some regards because they are fugitives and like they're just trying to get like they are on the run, trying to find a place for them to be, like where they can live. But they're being hunted, and so it's like their lives are literally on the line. So it's like they don't have a choice in the matter. And let's face it, survival is a good motive for any story. So
it's a very basic motive, but it's not a bad motive at all. I mean, like, the Hateful Eight is rife with it, and it's got amazing character development. But it also has some other side motives as well, so that's not the only motive, but it's a strong motive. Yeah, I think it's hard to see, and I don't want to be like, oh, you need to know what you're living for. But at the same time, there is some degree of, especially for a third movie where these people have been fighting for their survival. Clearly, this is more of a survival movie than maybe the previous two. But at the same time, we need to see, like, why does Eddie Brock really care about living so much? And why is he going out of his way to help people who are in need and stuff like that? It's not super clear, and it very much just feels like a stock, I need to live, so I'm going to do these things. And
yeah,
I don't hate it. I didn't take away full points from that, but it is definitely like it could have been better.
No,
I wish they would have had
I didn't
some
give it
sort
full
of motive.
points there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in regards to what you were saying earlier, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just was saying that it is stock. It's very middle of the road. It's not memorable. It's very like we've seen this before. It works. So I mean, it's not like it doesn't. It does logically follow and make sense. But it's at the same time, it's like it's not something new or unique,
right,
to this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying earlier that kind of idea is rife through these films, where how is he changed from the first Venom movie to the third Venom movie, which is where we're at today. And I think that that's definitely a problem we will see in longer series especially, right? And usually you see this in TV shows. You don't see this in movies, because movies are usually one and done until the last decade, where they've been making 5 movies of the same character, and then you do have to see that more often. But you know, for example, there was that show, I don't think it's running anymore, but Once Upon a Time, that was all about these people who are trapped in this world, and it was these fairy tale creatures type thing, and I think that was what it was called, right? Where it had
no, it's Once Upon a Time, yes.
And they had the character of Rumpelstiltskin, and he was interesting at first because they had some great character development for him, but the problem with the show was eventually they started to just recycle and rehash the same types of character development until it was pretty predictable. Oh, Rumpelstiltskin's going to try to become good, and then he's going to fall back into his treacherous ways type thing. And then you go, okay, well, now I know what's going to happen. This isn't exciting. This isn't intriguing. There's nothing new here. And that's what you're really looking for, is like, what is new for this person? Is he really growing, or is he static? And if you don't really have anything that he stands for after 3 films, it's hard to say that we can get invested in his character arc. Because what arc is there? And so this isn't a specific critique of the first and second films. Those have to be analyzed on their own. But in this film specifically, you definitely don't see that. So it's a big oof on their part. What were your thoughts on the tracking ability? Because a lot of the uniqueness of, especially, and maybe this is trying to give it the devil's advocate, right? So
yeah, the Codex, well, it's almost like they couldn't track Venom unless he shows up. Like, when Eddie Brock is just Eddie Brock, and the symbiote's inside of him, he's essentially fine. Like,
he's invisible to the
Xenophages. They can't track Venom. It's only when Venom comes out, manifests, that they could see him and track him, and then know exactly where he is. Which was compelling on a certain level, because I was like, okay, like, it literally restricts their ability, whereas, like, technically, if they're trying to survive, Venom needs to stay hidden.
Right.
He needs to stay inside of Eddie Brock. He shouldn't be coming out. Which, on a certain level, that works. And there are a few scenes, like the chase down the river, where the army finds Venom, and, like, he has to fight them. Suddenly, like, Venom is forced into a situation where he has to manifest and come out, because the army is, like, is attacking them. Like, he can't just, like, do nothing in this situation. And of course that lures the Xenophage to their location, and then the Xenophage starts attacking the army and Venom, and that whole fight happens. But with that being said, there are scenes that are like the whole scene in Vegas where he's dancing, like, it's hilarious. Admittedly, it is really funny.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, it's, like, unnecessary. And considering that he knows by that point that they can track him when he comes out, it almost doesn't make any sense.
I didn't even think about that. That's a good point.
Like, and I mean, if they had been drunk at that scene, maybe I'd have explained that more, but they're not drunk is the problem. Like, they're like, he's acting all stupid in that scene, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, all he did was gamble, and he's, I don't know. I mean, I did enjoy the scene. I thought it was funny, but it also doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah, that was. Yeah. So, yeah, that was so stupid. Um, I 100% agree with that. Yeah, man, that's crazy. Gosh, that's so blatant too. Like you would think someone would catch that, and that's what you just throw in some line or a quick scene where he like takes 2 shots of something, right, or whatever to indicate that he's inebriated and not making wise decisions. Yeah, man, that's such an easy fix too. What the heck?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. See, I'm surprised your rating's higher than mine at that point.
I will give I will try to give movies points to my reviews if I feel like they deserve it, or I feel like if there's like questions in my mind, I'm like, well, I'll give it like points here, just because I feel like, because I don't want to trash a movie unless it absolutely deserves it to a certain degree. I don't know. I mean, people hate the story for what it is, but I don't think the movie as a whole deserves to be trashed. There are scenes I enjoyed in this movie, so take that what you will. But the story itself definitely needed a lot of work.
So. Yeah, no, that is definitely true, and that's one of those exact reasons why. Did you feel like the story got better as they got thrown in different situations? Was there an increase in tension or any world-shattering losses that you think were worthy of mention for causing us as the audience to be invested in this film?
I mean, I will say things did get worse on a certain level. Like, as the story progressed, the army is clearly closing in on him, and they eventually do capture him. But then, of course, the Xenophages are also, like, closing in on him, too, getting an idea of where Venom is. So, by the end of the movie, we have them trapped, eventually, in that whole, like, Area 51 situation. So, I mean, things do kind of get worse as the movie progresses. Well, that's makes sense how everything progresses at that point. I mean, that's arguable, but I think it does get worse. As far as themes and ideas, I don't really know if there's any theme or idea this movie has. It's really, I mean, it's supposed to be like focused on the bond between Venom and Eddie. That's one of the big focuses of the movie. And I mean, that's the point of all of the movies, but so I guess you could say maybe there's a theme of friendship or like brotherhood, maybe like between the two of them. But if that was supposed to be the theme or idea, that should have been focused on more. Right. Maybe given more development.
Well, and they have so many scenes monologuing where Eddie and Venom will be talking to each other and saying, this is what's going on, this is why we're being chased, this is what the Xenophages are, blah, blah, blah. And you get so much information just thrown at you that you don't even have time to think about, well, what could this mean? Or even for them to have a discussion on why they're doing what they're doing, really. So it's very much a fight or flight type scenario. But then you'll have random scenes where they'll go, oh, you crazy alien conspiracy theorist people, yes, I will ride with you in your car, and then I will save you from dying. And as much as I will say, though, Otto Hightower showing up in this movie was the best part of the movie, in my opinion. The actor who played the dad of all of these alien-loving goons was the best, and I thought he was hilarious because he picks up that nuke or his grenade launcher, whatever that was, and then shoots it, and then realizes, what the heck am I doing, and drops it and runs. I was like, yep, that's exactly right. He wanted to be cool for 1 second and then realized he was not cool and ran away. Like there was a couple of scenes where that was prime. I love that. But that being said, it's like, does Eddie care about people? Is that why he's doing this? Does he only care about himself? Does he care about him and Venom? Clearly he does to some degree, but yeah, there was no real discussion or time for discussion. So boom, gone. Yeah, I mean, the other thing too, well, let's just talk about the ending. So at the very end, because you have the Xenophages and you have Venom, and like you said, they're in the chopper, and he goes, I don't think we're going to get out of it. And then they construct this whole scenario where they lure the Xenophages around Venom, who then absorbs all of them and corrals them through his symbiote glue to the acid spigot, and then has it dumped all over them till they die. What was your impression of that climactic final battle scene?
It was one of those scenes where you could kind of tell, like, either Eddie and Venom are gonna die at the end of this movie, or one of them is going to die, because clearly that's hyped so many times. Like, the Codex will only disappear if one of them dies. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, some of the characters like Strickland are trying to kill off one of them so that they get rid of the Codex. So in some ways, even though they're like antagonists to Eddie and Venom, they're not like, they're actually like trying to stop Null from coming. So, but
right.
So like, you could tell it was coming regardless of everything that was going on. I was like, okay, this is only going to end one way. And that was clear, especially at the scene of the helicopter. I was like, okay, this is only going to end like this. So, I mean, Eddie survives, though, because Venom saves him, more or less.
Right.
But yeah, like, Venom... the whole scene where Venom's corralling them, I'm considering that the Xenophages were going after him to get the Codex, I'm a little confused, like, how him, like, absorbing them keeps them from getting the Codex. Like,
yeah.
It was a little questionable, but that's more of, like, lack of explanation, if anything. Like, what does it, like, how do they catch him? How does, like, this make sense, I guess? It's, like, more of, like, world building that's not explained, I guess.
Yeah. Like, what actually holds the Codex? Is it Venom? Is it Eddie? It looks like it's held in the spinal cord of the symbiote being when he's alerting them where he's at. But that's all we know. So we don't know who it's truly attached to.
Yeah. And then as far as the acid destroying them, I guess it makes sense in some ways, but it's also like, well, these creatures were indestructible like 5 minutes before this. Mm-hmm. And this acid is able to eat away at them, which is like, well, I guess we haven't seen the acid used on them yet. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's almost like a surprise, like, well, how does this, wait, like, it almost didn't make sense.
It felt a little like, contrived, sure. Or like coincidentally convenient.
Yeah. So it almost felt like there should have been like a quick scene before that where some acid gets on one of the Xenophages and it doesn't heal from that. Like, that would have made a whole lot more sense. Mm-hmm. Maybe in the context of the story where it's like, okay, we know one thing that can kill them. And then it would make more sense for Venom to corral them into the acid. Because it's like, okay, this kills them.
I think that definitely would have been such a strong hint that maybe you would be able to foresee it happening. So maybe that was the idea. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, just trying to think of it from a writer's perspective. Like, how do you surprise and subvert expectations as the audience while also foreshadowing it enough? Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you, though, that it still feels very contrived.
Yeah, it's just... And we have the one scene with the acid where it, like, is poured over that vehicle or the tanker or something, and it eats away at it. Mm-hmm. But that's not really enough as far as, like, it doesn't say that it will destroy the Xenophages. Mm-hmm. It's, like, even in a different context, it doesn't even have to be that acid. Like, we could have had a scene in a completely different setting, different area, a little bit of acid gets on it, and one of the characters is like, oh, acid hurts them.
How did maybe Venom knew?
Yeah, it's just, how would you have gotten that information across?
Yeah, and we're kind of pulling at straws here. It's not like we should be giving them too much of a leeway. It's one of those hard things to say as a writer. Like, how would you do this in a way that was compelling and still foreshadowing, but still surprising the audience? And that's a very hard thing to do, right? Subverting expectations is probably one of the more difficult things to do in a compelling film, but I think that was the idea of what they were trying to do here, and needless to say, it caused at least some minor questions, if not some major ones, without providing answers. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. What is your thoughts on, and I think even if that's true, even if this was a great ending to Venom's arc, the big problem to me is that it was so obviously coming. And you talked about that earlier. But the bigger thing is that even from the start, the title of the movie itself indicates that this is going to happen, right? Venom, The Last Dance. What is... So, regardless, we know these two characters are being separated by the very idea that this is the end for them as a partnership. So, either they separate ways and Venom finds a way to find a new host, or Eddie Brock dies, or Venom dies, or they both die. Those are the only options with a title like that, or you're lying to us. So, I mean, if you have that title, I wonder what's going to happen when I watch this film. Oh my goodness, Venom died? That's crazy. No, I'm not going to react like that. No one is, because you gave us what was going to happen in the film in the 4 words that this title of the movie was named. So, it's like... It was just like you watch that film. This reminded me of the review we did a couple months ago, the Viggo Mortensen film, The Dead Don't Hurt, where at the very beginning of the film, you see that the lady is dead. And then it builds up to the lady dying. And you go, oh, well, that doesn't really surprise me because you showed it at the beginning of the film. It was literally the first thing I saw. So it's so I don't know what you expect. You don't I can't look at that Venom dying and be like, crap, you guys set up expectations and then not only fulfilled but exceeded those with something I couldn't even imagine, so much worse, right? This is the idea of out of the frying pan into the fire that you're supposed to do when you're writing a film. If you tell me what's going to happen, you can't make it worse than what I expect. I don't know. I don't know how many more ways I could say that was such a dumb move. But please call your movie something else. That's it. Okay. I'm moving on, unless you have something else to say.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree. The title was stupid. But what would have been the title then? What do you think? Like for Venom, like considering that they are sticking away from numbers, like we didn't have Venom 2, we had Venom Let There Be Carnage. What would be Venom 3 at that point?
I mean, right off the top of my head, do I know what I would name it? No, but there's like plenty of options, plenty of things you could have probably pointed to indicate where Venom was going. Like, I don't know, Venom Panic at the Disco. I don't know, like something like that. There's any number of ways you could have gone with this that didn't indicate to you what the ending was going to be. So I don't think it should be that hard. And the whole thing is that when you're watching this film, in all honesty, you are not going to watch the third Venom film based off of the subtitle to Venom. It's not going to make a difference, you know? No one's going to look at Venom, Let There Be Carnage and go, you know what? If it had been called Venom, Let's Do It Again, I would have watched this film. But no, you said Venom, Let There Be Carnage. I'm not watching it. Like, no one's doing that. So, in some ways, the subtitle is inconsequential. But in this case, it sucked. So, because it revealed everything.
They might as well have just called it Venom Looking for Spider-Man. That's what they should have called
it. Yeah, exactly. You know, Venom. Let's talk about cockroaches unnecessarily for too long. Like,
yeah,
that was a piece of this movie. That's for sure. All right.
Like Venom? What's not to like about Christmas?
Oh my gosh. Okay, we'll get to those side characters in a second. Let's Jeez. Anything else you want to say about Eddie Brock and Venom? Like, I think we just want to make sure we cap that real hard before we move on.
Yeah, I think we've covered everything. I can't think of anything we haven't covered yet.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and it's hard to get a message of what they're trying to tell you from this film with content like that. So I didn't give it anything. This is where I thought if you had something for me to draw out of this that I didn't see, I'll gladly take it and give it extra points. But I don't think either of us got that. Cool. Well, we're going to move on to the side characters real quick. Let's talk about Sadie Christmas. What are your thoughts on Sadie Christmas?
Let's start by saying something else about the side characters.
Sure.
I think there's maybe another problem with this movie. I also got the impression they were trying to jam as many comic symbiotes as they could in this movie, or like make references to side characters in the comics as they could in the short time frame they had. Because there's a bunch of symbiotes that show up, and characters, though apparently, like, because they even brought Detective Mulligan back from the second movie, because he becomes, in the comics, he becomes a symbiote hero called Toxin, who would have been a cool character to show, except apparently he doesn't become Toxin in this movie. He gets a different symbiote, and I don't even know who that's supposed to be. And then you have a bunch of other like random symbiote characters who just like show up, and I don't know. It's just like it's like a quick like cameo fest, like with a bunch of like random characters. Right. I even think the girl in the minivan, like the daughter of the hippie, I think she's supposed to be a reference to another character too, but I'm not completely sure about that.
Okay.
But anyways, it's like yeah, Sadie Christmas. I think she is a comic character who's, and I guess the symbiote she bonds to is like called Thrasher or something. But yeah, her character didn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, the only thing you get off of her is that she cares. Like she's a little sympathetic to the symbiotes in her work with them. She's not like anti-symbiote or anything like some of the other people are around her. She likes Christmas for some reason. And, but yeah, like, we're not really given, like, a whole lot of motive for her character aside from that. Like, not really a whole lot of development aside that she helps Dr. Payne, who, like, she's given more development as a character, but even she, it's like, I don't know, like, is it really... Because, and maybe because of the whole monologuing through this movie, it's not genuine. It doesn't feel like she's doing this genuinely because of her brother. It's almost like we needed, because, and it was like the whole, like, they were telling us why she was doing it, but they should have shown us more of her passion and more of her, like, I don't know, like, I'm not even sure, because, like, they were clearly trying in some scenes to show that, I feel like, but they were also, like, it was so poorly done, it didn't work, and maybe that's the actor's fault, not the writer's fault in that situation, but it...
I mean, some of it was the dialogue, I think, because you get some very stock dialogue from her, and it just doesn't come across as genuine when you're saying things that no normal person would say. Oh, I did... Like, you don't go to this guy that you're kind of combative with a little bit in the movie and say, this is my motive for being in science, blah, blah, blah. No. Most people don't go around saying, this is why I'm here, and this is why I'm working in a casual conversation. As they walk to the office. Call me a liar, I don't know. But that's not what I've seen in my life, or in most other people's lives that I've heard from them. So, contrived dialogue. Once again, not great. Leads to stock characters. I almost thought for a second that Sadie Christmas was a somewhat interesting character because she had this family heirloom of a Christmas tree, and she was like, no, it's a family heirloom. It's not that I love Christmas. And then I found out her last name was Christmas, and I went, oh, that's lame. So, yeah, I don't know. If they were meant to be cameos of characters in the comics, I'm sure has more value, right? I could see that. But in regards to storytelling for the film we just watched, not that compelling. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Strickland, and then let's talk about the hippies, if you want to talk about the hippies. What are your thoughts on Strickland as a character? He's kind of a villain, but he's also, and for you who are listening, Strickland is the military side of this whole Area 51 thing, the one who was hunting Eddie Brock, and he's part of the government, and he's trying to make sure that Eddie Brock gets killed so that this character Null doesn't get unleashed into the world, right? So he's kind of a good guy, kind of a bad guy character.
I mean, at the very least, he has probably the most development of all characters in this movie, which isn't, it's not even not that much. It's like he has the most development, which is like, he has like, because he's trying to do his job.
Right.
He's trying to capture the symbiotes, not make sure that they're not running free, and he is antagonistic towards the symbiotes, which isn't fully explained, but he is. He has a problem with them, but he does seem to care about his people and his men, and he has an antagonism against Eddie Brock because Eddie Venom has helped get some of his men killed.
Yeah.
But yeah, his character doesn't make a whole lot of sense in some scenes, and there's like, I mean, none of the characters like the 100% of the time make sense in this movie. Like sometimes they make decisions that just are like, why? And you're never given an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, it's just like, is it supposed to run with it and just hope that it makes sense by the end, and it doesn't. So it's and as far as the hippies go, they're kind of funny, they're weird, but it's just like, and I guess it kind of makes sense. Like Area 51 is closing down. It's like, oh, let's go check out Area 51 before they shut it down for good.
Right.
They're a weird bunch, and they do have some of the, like, there's quite a few. This is a dark comedy, so there's like some really funny scenes, especially like the whole vegan scene is hilarious. He's like,
I don't even remember that scene.
I mean, it's not that long. No, it was very long. It was more like a comment where it's like he gives them like the food, like the offering Eddie food. He's like,
and
look at like none of it is, and he's like, oh, thank you. And then Venom like makes him throw it behind him into the woods. He's like, pass.
Yeah, that was funny. That actually was hilarious.
But yeah, that's all they get. We're not fully shown what they love and what they like or what they really want.
Yeah. And if we're not given anything to go off of, we can't value the characters. So it's perfectly legitimate. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much my sentiment for all of the characters that are the side characters. So I'm fully in agreement with you. Nothing more really to say there.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to wrap it all up, what was your thoughts on the ending of the film? Did the movie leave you satisfied? What are your overall thoughts? Would you change your review after seeing him stare off into the sunset at the Statue of Liberty?
Well, I mean, they're clearly going for the whole goodbye, like, I will never forget you kind of thing, where it's like, I mean, at the very least, this movie does let a character die, which is saying something, where it's like, Venom's clearly dead, at least in this universe, but
But did you see the black cockroach in the ending credit scene? Oh, maybe he's not dead. Sorry, keep going.
But anyways, it's like, but as I said at the beginning earlier, like this movie felt like they are trying to close out the Venom movies, the Venom's like the story arcs of these characters, but they're also like setting other things up. So whether they continue that in other movies or they continue that in like the MCU, I don't know, because I guess now it's connected to the MCU now. So it's like, well, maybe Null's going to show up and fight Spider-Man. Who knows?
Right.
I guess that's a possibility. I guess the Kraven the Hunter movie is kind of set in the same universe. I don't know, but who knows? I mean, we'll see. So it's like, it's not clear what they were going for overall in this movie, aside from like closing this movie out. Mm-hmm. And while at the same time, I don't know. It's like, there was like trying to do two contradictory things at the same time in this movie. And it's like, it just left me confused.
Yeah.
That's all it did. It left me confused.
Yeah, what were the contradictions specifically that you were concerned about?
Well, like, it's almost like they're trying to build a finale for Venom. Mm-hmm. Like this is the last time we'll see him, like, or done. Like, his character's gone. Like, Eddie's saying goodbye. He's in New York now. Venom is, like, the symbiote is no longer existent. But at the same time, like, we're shown Null is still alive and well. Right. Even though he can't come to the mainstream universe. He's like, I'm going to come back. Like, I'm going to go kill everyone is, like, the idea we get from Null. And it's like, okay, well... like, so clearly we haven't seen the last of Null, though we've seen the last of Venom, so what's going to happen?
Right.
Like, what is... They're just, like, little things like that throughout this movie, and this is like, I just don't like when a movie's contradictory like that. If you're going to make a final movie, make it a final movie. Don't leave us hoping for more, I guess. Like, leave us like, saying, oh, there's going to be something else. Like,
yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just the whole, like, multiverse, like, shared universe mythology kind of thing they are going for this, and it's not helpful in this particular story, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, potential cameos for future things. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it adds more confusion. And could they show Null in a different film? Yeah, absolutely. You don't need that extra cameo bit at the end. You don't need an Avatar: The Last Airbender end cut scene where you go, "Oh, there's another bad guy. He's still out there, ready to kill people." No, don't do that. Who knows if you'll have the budget for the next Venom film or wherever you're gonna put Null. Just don't. Just tell a good story. Let it be. So that's where we're
Yeah.
at. I would only make my rating lower based on this conversation. I don't know if you would, but that's where I'm at. So, any parting thoughts?
The only thing I'll say is that I do love, like as I said before, I like dark
Mm-hmm.
comedies, and this movie did legitimately make me laugh. Will I see this movie again? Maybe for the humor. Like I would like maybe see some of those scenes again because they made me laugh. But that's just me. I know I'm that kind of person. I know that's not you, so I don't expect you to watch this movie again. So,
Yeah, I already got.
now will I go out of my way to watch this movie? Probably not. I don't know if I
Sure.
would do that. So I'm more likely to watch Tag again than I would watch Venom the Last Dance. So
Nice, nice. That's a good sentiment to leave it with. So that's what we took out of it, and was that what you guys took out of it as the audience? Leave us a review. Let us know in the comments. We'll be back next week as we always are. See you all then.